Hi, my name is Dr. Dee Blackie, and I did my doctoral research on the lived experience of neurodiverse children. So that's children who may have learning disabilities, developmental delays, they may have ADHD, and they're often on the autism spectrum. I identified 7 different stages where children engage with the world and where their neurodiversity really shows up. The first is presence, or how they show up, how they perceive the world, how they control themselves, how they participate, how they either allow for the flow of life or stop the flow of life, how they communicate, and how they adapt to change. And the important thing to remember is that autism is not a linear spectrum. You're not a little bit autistic or a lot autistic. What tends to happen is a whole bunch of things show up at the same time when you're engaging with the world, and that impacts on your physical presence, your mental capabilities, your emotional presence, as well as how you engage with people socially. So you might find at the point of presence, you're struggling with sensory challenges, or you're feeling a little bit dissociated. From a perception point of view, you may be struggling with learning disabilities or have some social and emotional dysregulation. From a control point of view, you might really struggle with obsessions and compulsions. When you're trying to participate, you may be feeling too dreamy or too disruptive. From a flow point of view, you might be feeling major social anxiety. From a communication point of view, you might have some tics or echoes or apraxia, and you might not be able to speak at all, so you may have selective mutism. And finally, from an adaptability point of view, you might have some very restrictive and repetitive behaviors or really struggling with trauma from just being in the world. When it comes to how neurodiverse children engage with their world, what was really interesting to me was how many children had sensory perception, discrimination, and integration challenges. There was also a real disconnect between body and mind. My mind says I should do something, but my body doesn't want to follow the instruction. And finally, they often felt incredibly permeable, especially when they were distressed. So they felt like they were spilling out into the world, or that the world was invading them. During my research, the therapy that seemed to have the most impact on children was sensory therapy, whether in a snoozlin room, as you can see on the left of this slide, or the boxing program that was happening at Fight with Insight in the Children's Memorial Institute. When I completed my research, I went to the board of the Children's Memorial Institute and asked if I could open a sensory space for all the children who attend school, therapy, art and sporting activities at the Children's Memorial Institute. They showed me the creche, and we started building in September 2023, and we opened the sensory space on the 29th of October in 2023, which was the 100th birthday of this amazing institute. This is Ngwanini, our little sensory buddy who helps you to understand and make sense of your sensory world. We have 2 different kinds of sensory systems. There's an external sensory system, and we're very familiar with that. It's about touch and taste and smell and hearing and seeing, as well as our proprioception, which is about the senses in your muscles, tendons, and joints, as well as in your inner ear, which is all around balance, called your vestibular system. But we also have internal sensory systems. We have barrier senses, pleasure and pain senses, full and fine senses, fight or flight senses, balanced body and mind sensors, pain and temperature sensors, and thermoregulatory sensors. And all of these can become disconnected in a neurodiverse child, and they desperately need support in terms of integrating them again. The kinds of challenges we observe in children is that sometimes they're way too sensitive and everything just is far too much for them. Sometimes they're just not sensitive enough and they keep banging into the walls and into other children and mouthing objects and so on. Sometimes they can't figure out what they're feeling and what that connects to in terms of their emotions. And sometimes their bodies just don't want to work with their brains, and there's a disconnect in terms of what they're feeling and what they're experiencing. The sensory space is broken up into 4 different areas. There's an air passage, a sea passage, a land passage, and a chill zone. And in each of these passages, we have 12 sensory rooms that the children can explore, and that tests all of their different sensory systems. In our air passage, we've got lots of rainbows and a sunshine room where we run lots of neurodiversity and sensory workshops. In our sea passage, you can immerse yourself in giant blanket sea anemones or explore our intricate coral reefs. In our tidal touch pool, you can touch and explore a whole bunch of creatures from the sea, from sea urchins to starfish, octopus, and friendly hermit crabs. In fact, we had a child who said his first words ever in the space. He said shell, water, and fish. From there, you can enter the kelp forest maze, which is made completely from recycled plastics, and you can look for the octopus, the shy and pajama sharks, and the blue stingrays amongst the various seaweed fronds. In our jellyfish room, you can bounce on giant jellyfish balls and watch an incredible light display. In our anemone room, we have a whole bunch of textures and lights that the children can explore and touch and feel. In our whale room, you can listen to the sound of whales swinging and either sit in one of our therapy chairs or in our giant egg chairs. In our land passage, we have huge, colorful African fabric trees. You can bounce or balance or jump around or try your hand at playing some of our African instruments. You can swing through the trees in our forest room, or you can bounce up and down in our baobab room, flapping your arms like a birdie. The most favorite room is our boulder boundary room, which has 15,000 balls in a huge ball pond. Our sand and gem room has a number of sand therapy stations, a huge sand pit, and a whole bunch of gems that the children can explore. The final space is our chill zone, where children can jump into our accessible ball pond. They can play with lots of fine motor toys. We give them a sensory suite and some sensory Play-Doh. You can find our website at sensory-space.com or on our social media at sensory-space, or come and visit us at the Children's Memorial Institute. Thank you for your attention. I hope you enjoy the rest of your day.